and welcome to Cherry Street Chat, the official podcast of the Seattle Spectator. My name is Caleb Stipkovits, and I am the managing editor at the Spectator.
And I'm Daniel Truog. I'm the sports and opinion editor at the Spectator.
So Daniel, how are you feeling about the episode?
Feeling pretty good. I'm excited for our first one of the year, starting off 2025 right.
Yeah, same here. I'm super excited, especially because we have our lovely guest, Dr. Carlson here. She is an expert in the fields of hate speech and First Amendment speech. She's written some really cool books that have done really well. She's had work featured in is it the Washington Post or it's the Wall Street Journal, right? Wall Street Journal, there we go.
Yeah.
I remember. So welcome, Dr. Carlson, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Happy to be here. Really appreciate you asking me to be your first guest.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for joining us today. How does it feel to be the first ever guest on Cherry Street Chat?
If I used the word honored, it wouldn't capture it.
Seriously,
jokes aside, I mean, I play around with you, but I think it's really great that the Spectator's doing a little more kind of multimedia and broadcast. I think the way that people get their news and entertainment is shifting. And so having this available to folks to talk about whether it's interesting topics or news of the day, I think it's going to be really great for students, for faculty, just something else to kind of pull us all together. So kudos to you guys for getting this started.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. So why did you become a professor and how did you get to Seattle University?
Great question. So I actually wanted to be a talk show. Ironically, here we are. So when I was a kid, I loved Oprah Winfrey. I wanted to be a talk show host. I got to college and really not bounced around in that I changed my major, but at that orientation event where you go visit a bunch of different majors, I kind of bounced around and then I found communication and journalism. And so I was actually doing a communication degree with a journalism minor, working on the school paper, all that kind of stuff. And we had a guest faculty member who was a PR professor, and he came in and I was just hooked. I was like, okay, I definitely want to do PR, but I felt like I only took 2 classes. I couldn't really go in and get a job right away. And so I did a master's in PR, worked in PR for several years, and then it kind of lost some of the things about it that made it fun. And so kind of on a whim, I applied to go get my PhD, and I had taken a course in grad school in communication law, and that's what I really enjoyed. And so I was living in Denver at the time, so I just applied to Boulder, got in, and did a PhD in media studies with an emphasis in communication law. And then I got this job. So I was on the job market, went to a couple different places, got different offers, but I just really connected with SU, the Jesuit mission, kind of the idea that people here are invested in making the world a better place and being of service. And that really spoke to kind of who and how I am. So that's me professionally. Personally, let's see. I am married. I live on the Hill. I've been at SU for this is my 11th or 12th, I think 11th year. I've got a little dog named Rocco. I like to run and I throw pottery and I like to read a lot. So that's just some of the things I do when I'm not at school or working.
Nice. That was the perfect introduction. I feel like I know you better already.
Wonderful. Lucky you. Lucky your audience. So.
You're also the chair of the comms department here at SU. What does it mean to be chair of comms department? I feel like as a student, that's kind of something that I don't really know a lot about.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So it means I send you a lot of emails. So our department has made a decision to be the kind of place where we want lots of different faculty to take their turn at being chair. And so once you've earned tenure and are a little more established in your career, it might be your turn. And so essentially it's my turn. So you might have had Professor Malleus or Professor Paul. Both of them have been chairs in the past. Dr. Jaw, who you guys know really well, she's been chair in the past. And so the faculty voted me in for a 3-year term. I'll probably do 2 of those terms. And basically I teach a few less classes in exchange for doing a lot of the kind of administrative work of the department. So I represent the department at the college level. I'm responsible for hiring and scheduling and some of the things that just kind of make the department go. I really like the position because it helps or gives me an opportunity to build a sense of community within the department. We've got amazing students, amazing faculty. And so for me, it's been really just a pleasure to get to do that work of creating opportunities for students, whether it's through alumni mentorship or some of that kind of stuff, doing events like ComFest. I really get a chance to kind of drive the direction of the department for a couple years. So And emails, so many emails. Yeah.
I really like the comms department events where there's free pizza. Those are some of my most
We'll
special
keep them
events
coming.
to my
I
heart.
mean, if people are interested, ComFest, I think, is February 27th. Here. You heard it here first. We're going tacos. So free tacos. Yeah, we're
Oh,
going to get
Okay.
crazy. Yeah,
okay.
if that doesn't draw people in, I don't know what will.
What are some other events that might be coming up for the comms
Ooh,
department?
great question. So I have to give a shout out to, we have a couple of interns that work for the comms department. So Shaylin Demony and Dominic Havar are two of our interns. And I know Shay is planning a Lunar New Year celebration for the next couple weeks. We're going to do a Valentine's Day, make some Valentines because it's not second grade, but sometimes it's still fun to like cut some construction paper. I mentioned a ComFest. I actually am really excited about that. I think we're going to do alumni speed dating. So you'll get to meet a bunch of different alums in your field and connect with them. I also think PRSSA is planning a visit to C+C, which is a local PR agency. So I think we've got some good stuff coming up this quarter.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of really great stuff that's coming up.
Yeah.
And then I guess the next thing I want to kind of ask you about is just a little bit about some advice. So for students
yeah,
who might
here we
be
go.
interested in
Yeah.
like following like your career path, either if it's in PR or becoming a professor or the prestigious chair of the comms
Oh my
department.
gosh, could you imagine?
What would you tell someone interested in that?
Don't do it. No, I mean, if you like money and free time, don't do it. No, jokes aside, I think whether it's this path or another path, I do think there's this kind of balance that has to happen between figuring out, like, what do you really enjoy, right? Like, what are you passionate about? What do you care a lot about? Is that going to come from work, right? Because there's lots of different ways to pursue your passions. For some people, that comes to work. I'm really fortunate that I get to do something that I care about, that I get to be of service, that it really aligns with my values. For some people, you know, the most important thing is to provide for their family or to have health insurance or pay rent. And so work might look like it's paying the bills and they're pursuing their passions in other ways. So I would say to students, one, don't put so much pressure on yourself to find that first perfect job. Get out there, get some experience, figure out beyond just the content of like, oh, I'm passionate about political science or I'm passionate about communication or whatever. What are the elements you like? Do you like to be around people? Do you like to work alone? There's some of that happening, I think, when you first get out. So I think figuring out kind of what am I passionate about? What do I care about? What role do I want work to play in my overall life? What do I want my days to look like? I think the people are really important in any job. So if I'm going into a field, am I going to be working with people who share the same interests, who see the world the same way? I think that can be really important. I think the people make any job or any career. And so I'm really lucky, like our department, I get along really well with the other professors and that makes it fun. But yeah, I would say if I was going to give one piece of advice, you know, figure out what you like, but also calm down, right? Like life is long. So like when I was your age, I think I was like waiting tables. I eventually worked at a newspaper. I sold children's encyclopedias for a little while. Like what? Like these random jobs where it's like, I think now there's a ton of pressure on students to like figure it out really fast. And I would say, you know, try some different things on for size, figure out what you like. And hopefully the path will kind of lay itself out in front of you. The other thing I will say, okay, I said that was the last thing, but this is really networking, everything. And networking does not mean like going to some weird cocktail party and like handing out business cards. It means like, oh, like who does your roommate know? Who do their friends know, right? Like who does the person you see at the gym know, right? Like all of those things, everybody you bump up against can be part of your network. And so as you figure out like, hey, these are the kinds of places I want to land, making sure that you leverage those folks to say, hey, I'm looking for something in broadcast. Do you know anybody? Alumni, I think, are a great part of your network. So I think the networking piece and who you know does make a big difference, at least getting you into the room for an interview, that sort of thing.
For sure.
Yeah, being at the Spectator has helped me like expand my horizons of what networking can be because like if I need to talk to someone for an article, like I think about who my roommate knows, who my friends know that I can get in touch with that has a certain perspective on something that I'm trying to cover. And so that's helped me like realize that it's not just going to networking events.
Yeah, that it seems like it should be this like fancy thing and it's really more just like who's already in my life that I can tap into and like being willing to kind of be a little bit vulnerable of like, hey, I'm looking for this or I need this. I think people want to help when you reach out for help. I know, Caleb, one of your internships came through a professor, right? Like a connection with a professor, right? It's just the people in your everyday life that can help you figure out like, oh, I know so-and-so or get this door open or that sort of thing.
Yeah. For sure. That's one thing I will say is use the opportunities that you have are make sure that you're taking them. Because for me, I did have a professor that was like, Caleb, you should apply to this. And I was like, okay. And if I hadn't have done that, I would never have gotten that internship. I would have never learned so many things. So definitely highly recommend making sure.
You'd be amazed. I was joking about the free tacos or whatever, but sometimes we'll have events where it's like, hey, we're bringing in all these alums. And I know students are busy and they have a lot going on. And I think it's hard at the time to be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to carve out time to go to these sorts of things. But taking advantage of the things that are kind of laid in front of you. I will say the good news is I think at SU we're really lucky that the SU degree, I think, is pretty well revered out in the community. And so when you are going, at least in Seattle, looking for opportunities, people look at, oh, you went to SU. That's really attractive to them. I also think, going to a Jesuit university, I just saw this the other day. I think this is cool. 10% of the incoming congressional class or 10% of Congress went to Jesuit universities.
Oh,
yeah, right? That whole
cool.
service piece. So yeah, it is pretty cool.
Wow.
In 2021, you wrote a book on hate speech. Can you remind us what that book is called?
It's literally called Hate Speech.
Okay. Why?
Sorry, you set me up. Okay, sorry.
Why is hate speech an important topic in 2021 and in 2025?
In 2025, yeah. Woo! Okay, so I am really interested in hate speech, and particularly the way social media companies have chosen to regulate hate speech. So as you may either know from your communication law class or be learning now, Daniel's in the comm law class now. So hate speech is protected, meaning it's allowed in the United States. This is really different than what a lot of other countries do. But what's unique about social media is that they're private virtual platforms. So they can go further than what the First Amendment would kind of dictate, and they can restrict hate speech. The question is, will they choose to? Is there a way to motivate them to? We know that hate speech can be really profitable for them, but historically, hate speech is a form of expression. So just to kind of define hate speech, I would say it's expression that maligns someone based on fixed identity characteristics. So not necessarily your political affiliation or, hey, I think Caleb acts like an a-hole or whatever. I don't, obviously. But it's much more about your fixed identity characteristics. So your race, your gender identity, your sexual orientation or ethnicity, nationality, those kinds of things about you. And so what we see is this can kind of create the conditions in a society for either discrimination or kind of at worst bias motivated violence. And so it matters. It matters if there's hate speech or this kind of rhetoric in the public sphere. It's also now starting to be proven that kids will have physiological effects, especially children of color, from having hate speech in, again, kind of public discourse. And so I think it's really important. I think it's really interesting to try and figure out ways to limit or minimize the amount of hate speech without necessarily, or at least attempting not to, infringe on people's right to free expression. Always we're balancing things, whether it's your right to privacy with your right to free expression. But in this case, I think we're really balancing the right to human dignity with that of free expression, and hopefully finding new and creative ways for social media to limit this. Now, I say all this. Did you guys see Mark Zuckerberg came out just a few days ago and basically said in the year of our Lord, 2025, he is rolling back content moderation, particularly around mis and disinformation, hate speech, etc. So they made an announcement, Meta, that they are going to move away from fact checking and instead have community comments, decide what is and isn't accurate. And so that's obviously very disappointing. So I think going into 2025 and obviously the second Trump administration, I honestly think that we're going to see a huge uptick. I know right after the war between Israel and Hamas, things got much worse online, right? So a lot more both hate speech against both Jewish folks and Palestinians. I think that increase is only going to continue exponentially under a new Trump administration. I think his rhetoric really makes people feel comfortable kind of saying the thing out loud that they're already thinking, and really being incredibly problematic in the speech that they use, particularly to describe trans folks or migrants. And so I think we're going to see a bunch more of that, both in person and online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of segues into my next question, which is also about the upcoming Trump administration. So before getting reelected, Trump was saying some things about wanting to potentially take away broadcasting licenses from networks whose coverage he disagrees with. He mentioned also wanting to throw some reporters in jail if they're using anonymous sources. So I'm curious, from your perspective as somebody who's very well versed in communication law, are these things possible, or is it kind of up in the air?
So normally I would say the answer is no. We would not see many of those things as being constitutional, right? So the First Amendment basically protects free expression and press freedom in this country. We're certainly not. We don't have the most free press in the world, but at least historically, we've had a lot of protections for journalists. We know that during the first Trump campaign, there was a lot of this like enemy of the people and characterizing journalists in problematic ways. I think, the broadcast licenses thing, like over the course of history, one or two people have gotten their broadcast licenses revoked. So I don't necessarily see that happening. He will also threaten to change the libel laws. Libels are state laws, so unless states go along with it, who knows? But I think I will say this, like creating the conditions for animosity against the press, absolutely. Eroding trust in media, right? I think it's really hard for folks to wrap their heads around. We do have a commercial media system, which means, yes, the goal of media companies is to make money. I think people get stuck between that and the goal of individual journalists really is to seek truth and report it, do no harm, right? Journalists are, I think, and you guys both know this, like, are really guided by, I think, a strong sense of ethics. And so for folks to really understand, ultimately, most journalists are seeking to really report the news, to tell people's stories, and are doing it in a very altruistic way. Obviously, that's not the case across the board, but my fear is that we're going to see again this rise in animosity, this lack of trust, and then we enter into this world where we don't all operate on the same set of facts, right? Like we're already in these kind of selective exposure bubbles, if you will, where through social media, like I'm able to say like, okay, I'll follow MSNBC on TikTok, but I'm not necessarily going to follow Fox News. And so I only get kind of one side of the story. So we're already kind of doing that. And then if we have a situation where certain groups of folks don't trust the media, we just all won't see the world the same way. And how do we make decisions about how to govern ourselves when that's the case? So I am honestly like kind of nervous about the threats to press freedom that we are likely to see with this administration. But admittedly, and this is obviously showing my politics here, but like add it to the list because I think there are a lot of freedoms that are going to potentially be curtailed in this next administration. It's depressing. Sorry.
Yeah,
It just is. What a time to be alive, right?
Not too uplifting.
I mean, what do you guys think? Are you nervous? I'm curious, like young folks. I mean, I know you guys are busy and kind of in your own day to day. Are people concerned about what the next couple years might bring? Are people just trying to get through it? Do you have a sense of what are you technically Gen Z, right? Like, where are people's heads at?
On election night, they had some watch party with the political science department.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I went to cover it for the Spectator, and I was talking to one of my friends before we turned the cameras on, and she was like, well, right now I'm taking a geology class, and we're sort of learning that the Earth has been around for billions of years, and so I'm kind of looking at this as a very small period of time. And so I feel like that's kind of like a lot of especially like left-leaning people like myself in this generation are sort of looking at it as sort of like trying to detach yourself from like, I don't know, it's hard to know what's going to happen. And so it's easier to just kind of try and not think about it.
Yeah, I totally get that. Caleb, what about you?
I'm definitely curious going into like an industry where I'll be like on TV and doing broadcast news, if I will see changes that might have been said or not. I'm kind of curious how that could affect like my job, or if it could affect people I work with and things like that. So for me, it's kind of like on a level of like, will this affect the career path I'm going into? And could it even possibly, like, if there are like certain First Amendment speech that ends up not being protected anymore.
Yeah.
Like, how does that kind of affect the industry? So I've been thinking a lot about, like, are there, if somehow, like, if the broadcast industry kind of gets, like, shut down or, like, anything weird happens, like, how can I still be able to, like, still be a journalist and still, like, be able to tell people what's going on? Because I still feel like even if something like that happens, like, people need to know what's going on.
Yeah. I think one of the things that, like, I'm concerned about, like, seeing some of these relationships between, like, and again, I'm always somebody that's like, how can we talk about politics without also side by side talking about capitalism, right? And so seeing like media companies be in the hands of these incredibly wealthy, you know, billionaires, right? So thinking about like Zuckerberg, Bezos, Musk, right? Like having so much influence over our media system and watching them like curry favor with politicians, or what's the relationship between the administration and these kind of billionaire media owners. I mean, that makes me kind of nervous of, is there going to be a chilling effect? You know, like, is the Washington Post going to, like, it didn't endorse anybody in the election, right? Because it's like, oh, we don't want to offend, right? Like, traditionally, journalists have been the ones that, like, speak truth to power and act as a watchdog, right? And so if they're scared to take on that role, who's going to do that and what's it going to look like, you know? But I am also confident in people. Like, we all are walking around basically with cameras now. So the idea that kind of wrongdoing will continue to, like, hide places, I think it depends what it is and what it looks like and stuff. But I think there's always going to be these, like, push and pull between those with power and those without. And we'll find ways to kind of tell stories or to get information out or get access to information. I hope. That's the optimist in me. Yeah.
I think social media platforms like TikTok, you know, there's pros and cons, but I think, like, in some ways it has made information easier, but like you said earlier, only to people that are, like, seeking it out.
It's hard. I mean, I feel like, okay, so are you guys on TikTok? Are you TikTok people?
Yeah.
So we have a no and a yes. Like, so Caleb knows fully, like, it's addictive, right? Like, the algorithm is, it knows you, right? Like, you get into one thing, and, like, sometimes it can be good. Like, I've been really into, like, Doechii lately. So, like, I can find out you go down a rabbit hole and you're like, oh, she did this and this year and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm learning all these things about her. So it's really cool when it's like, oh, I'm kind of new into this and I want to learn more and stuff. But at the same time, like, you really have to, like, curate your feed. And then you can have news, like, in your social media feed. But it can also be problematic, as we know, right? Like, I will be the first to admit, I'll watch something like, oh, like, I like to work out, so I'm watching, like, oh, lifting, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, it's what I eat in a day. And the next thing it's like, should I be eating it all? Right? Like, there's that kind of stuff. Like, it goes quickly into, like, you should live on 1,000 calories a day, whatever it is. Like, there's just these problematic aspects to the different kind of topic areas. But then it's also, like, I don't know about you, like, I've seen amazing coverage of these California fires on TikTok, right? So a lot of our broadcast comes through social media. So,
yeah. That's something that really interests me, is, like, watching, like, the news on TikTok sometimes, because I'll be like, wow, like, this is normal now. And it's like, and it increasingly is becoming really popular. Like, a lot of younger people are getting a lot of their information from TikTok or, like, Instagram, even YouTube.
Yeah.
So
I love it. I mean, I think if you can bring that stuff to folks, because before, broadcast was really struggling, right? Because people aren't doing what we call appointment consumption. They're not just going to sit down and, like, at 6 o'clock, I watch the news. I think that's even a generation above mine, like boomers. But the idea that, like, oh, there's still a value to broadcast content. And honestly, like, what you all are doing, like, I think podcasting and, like, the emergence of audio content has been really exciting. So it's just cool to see, like, as we have these new technologies come out, how people adapt. Because I do think whether Trump is president or someone else, like, we're always going to want news. We're always going to want journalists to kind of provide that check on power and provide us with the information we need to govern ourselves. And so it's just interesting to see what that's going to look like moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, and then I have one more question that's just kind of about maybe some of the things we might see, like, with speech. Is there just any other things you can think of where, like, free speech or where protected speech might be affected in the next 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things that are just, like, on my radar, and maybe it's because we just talked about it in class today, but, like, I am going to be curious how, and again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but there have been some Supreme Court decisions. Some of them I think are really positive in the way that the Supreme Court views social media regulation. So I think there is kind of an openness to transparency regulations, but we're really not in favor of the government kind of telling platforms what they do or don't have to carry. And so I think in terms of social media regulation, it's going to remain fairly hands-off. You know, we've got these new regulations about kids not being able to access social media. I think that's really interesting. In terms of like thinking about the next 4 years, I think political speech, right? Like, are people going to feel comfortable continuing to speak their mind, to protest, to gather? I hope so. I think the first Trump administration showed us that people are willing to do that and are willing to kind of be brave. I don't know if everybody saw there's a march happening on Inauguration Day starting at Garfield High School. So I think people are going to really, like, it's one thing to say, like, will it have a chilling effect or will it spark people to speak more, to really hold tighter to those freedoms? Obviously, I'm nervous for press freedom, as we talked about. You know, it'll be interesting to see, will we see some of these billionaire media owners continue to cater to Trump? I think Zuckerberg's announcement about fact checkers suggests yes. And so, again, for me and from my perspective and the things I'm interested in, you know, I do think it'll be really interesting to see what impact this presidency, especially the second time around, has on our media environment. I think there'll be places where there is kind of a chill, and then I think there'll be places where people really step up. And honestly, I think we need journalism now more than ever, and so we may see some really great work being done over the next 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now
Fun?
we're going to pivot.
Okay,
yes,
I'm hoping. Oh my God, we got
you know
it
exactly
so
what's going
serious.
On.
I know.
So, have you heard of Rate My Professor?
Oh my! Do not ask a professor if they've heard of Rate My Professor. Of course we've heard.
Well,
what?
Do you have? I know. Normally,
Caleb, no, you do not. Oh my God!
Situations.
Are you serious?
So, okay,
I love it.
funny story, right?
Okay,
so
hit me.
I was like wondering, I wonder what Dr. Carlson's Rate My Professors are like.
I haven't looked at it forever.
We knew we were going to make you read them.
Is it
but
good
I
or
checked
is it?
And I was like, I wonder if there's something juicy.
Hit me.
You have like the most crystal clear
what?
Rate My Professor I've
I haven't
ever
been
seen.
on. It's probably been a couple years.
No
yeah.
bad reviews.
No.
So I'm gonna give you
5 stars. What? Okay.
It's like perfect.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna
Are we
give
reading
you this,
these? Oh my God, I love it.
I just want you
the
to
best.
read, react, talk about it, anything. So.
Okay, I love that you're like, it's crystal clear, and I'm like, okay, I love. Nothing makes me happier than seeing 4s and 5s in my difficulty. This 2 in difficulty feels a little bit
might have been a smart kid.
Hurtful. Okay, I love it. Well, they might have been. That's true. Okay. Oh my God, stop. I'm gonna get all clumped. Okay. So this. Do you want me to read it? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, you can read
here?
a couple of them.
Okay.
You don't have to read all
right.
of them.
Oh, this is you guys, this is such like a little ego boost. And this one's from last fall. Oh, okay. All right. So this was probably last fall. I was teaching Intro to Media Studies. This person says, quote, seriously, top 3 best professors at SU. Professor Carlson succeeds at being a professor, head of the communication department, and is a role model to all her students. She is very thoughtful, kind, and strives to know and love every student. Her lectures are far from boring. Oh my God. My heart is so full. Let's see. It's anonymous, so this isn't just to brown nose, which I love, right? Carlson is one of the kindest professors I've met at SU. She's easy to learn from, incredibly knowledgeable. She helped me get started in the program. All of the work she assigns is simple and to the point. She's also super understanding and helpful if you are struggling. The midterm and final are exactly what she lectures. Well, this is just, oh my God, this is very kind.
When we were coming up with the idea of a segment to do, and I thought it would be fun to do Rate My Professor reviews, because there's always some person that's like gives the professor a 1 and is like, I got a D, I skipped class twice a week, but I still got a D and I'm really mad about it. And we kind of didn't find any juicy stir the pot type of reviews.
Nothing.
Yeah. Nothing.
Well, it's probably, let's not forget, like, I am a white woman, so I do want to have a disclaimer about sometimes these reviews, while it's very sweet, can be very biased based on race or gender or that sort of thing. So I feel very lucky that I think there's also a likability component, but anyway, it is super flattering, and I do really appreciate it. And I will say, like, the students at SU are the best, right? So it's not hard to connect with them and have a good time in class. I mean, Daniel, you were in class today. We had fun, right? Like,
yeah, it was a good class period today.
What did we do? We were watching some John Oliver talking about Chevron deference, which, if nothing says fun on a Friday morning like Chevron deference and the future of administrative law, I don't honestly know what does. I don't know what does. Well, this was very sweet. Thank you guys for pulling these. I'm going to silently read them and maybe send them to my mom because she would be totally impressed by this. So, what do you guys look for in a good professor? What do you think makes a good professor here at SU? Or what qualities do some of your favorite profs have?
I've been delaying taking comm law so that I could take it with you.
Oh, blessings.
So that was
flattery
part of that.
Will get you everywhere.
Yeah. But I think usually I don't know. I feel like most classes there's only 1 or 2 sections and you don't usually get to choose your professor. I haven't had a lot of classes like that, but I don't know about you, Caleb.
Yeah, I think most of the classes I've taken have been like I've had to take, like, I usually don't rate my professor before because like I usually I'm just like I know I have to take this and like you know like I have to take this class and it's the only person that's teaching it. But I will say like qualities that I like in my professors are definitely like I like people who are definitely engaging, which I know is like such a like obviously answer. But I like people who kind of have a more creative way of teaching their class because for me, like I can get very bored sometimes when I'm just reading like a textbook or learning about something that's very like standard or whatever. And so like having like a class where like we have real world examples, where we have to kind of maybe read some things that are more recent. Those are things that I really like having just because curriculum wise, that kind of, it helps me relate to whatever I'm learning a little bit more and it's super useful.
Yeah.
So.
Are there things that you guys have done in class? Because you're both seniors, right?
Yes.
Are there things that you look back on that kind of stand out as like, oh, this was a really cool experience, or I'm so glad I got to do this as part of a class?
I think for me,
putting you on the spot here. I know you asked me a bunch of questions.
I might just be saying this because I did end up working there, but in Professor Major's multimedia reporting class, I got to go to Como News and just check out what it looks like in a broadcast studio, and for me that's like super cool because like a field trip to where I want to work. So I was like, whoa, I was looking all around, like the studio was super cool. We saw like the weather deck and like just a bunch of really cool stuff. So I'd say for me it was like going on that field trip.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, kind of a similar thing. I like those sort of experiences that take you outside of the classroom. Last quarter I took a class called Aerial Mapping and Imaging.
Awesome.
That was all working with drones to build maps and things like
cool.
that. Which was super.
Is that part of the GSIS certificate?
Yeah,
that's a new certificate. Yeah. Are you doing the certificate?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Okay.
And and so we did a lab where we like set up a tent and then used a drone to estimate the volume of the tent.
Oh, cool.
And it was sort of like, you know, you're with the same people that you're in the classroom with, but you're outside of the classroom. It's like, you know, it's more of like, I don't know, you just see your classmates in a new setting, see your professor in a new setting, and you get to do something that's like building a practical skill, similar to like, I did the Como News visit as well. And it was a really fun experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those experiential things, I think, make a huge difference. Did you take, I know, now I'm like, you can cut this. Did you take environmental communication last quarter?
Yeah. With
and
Dr.
you
Crow.
Guys went out and did a bunch of stuff, right? Like,
did
you go to like Target and stuff, or?
We went to Whole Foods and looked at the labels on the packages.
Yeah.
And we had like some journalists from Grist come in. Which was really cool.
But yeah, it's interesting how those like experiential things can really make a class. And I do think, like, not to be like, oh, SU's the greatest, but I do think we do a lot of those kind of, we actually have a name for them. They're called high impact practices. But it is the kind of thing that like, it sticks with you. And so when you're trying to get students to really learn something, doing things like that can be pretty incredible. We were lucky. We had, I might have told you guys this in class, 2 years ago, we had the Supreme Court, like the head of the Washington State Supreme Court, come and visit our class. But that was really cool. Like he had a body man, like a security guy. Yeah, it was awesome. And the security guy was actually a comms major too. So he was like answering questions. It was a whole thing. It was super fun. But yeah, I love that kind of stuff when it's like, just get outside your normal kind of routine. Yeah. Fun.
Yeah.
What else you guys got over there?
Well, I think we are running out of questions.
Oh, no.
So I
Okay.
actually think it's time for our first outro. I don't really know what we're going to do for the outro. So you're like part of a brand new experience
okay.
as well.
Are we making one up here on
I
the
guess,
spot?
Shall we do it?
Is it finger guns or is it like...
We probably can't do that.
No, that's
There's
weird.
probably censorship.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Never mind. I mean, finger points. Would you like... See you around, like, or like a Mr. Rogers.
Like
do you want to like
cool like call out?
A call out? Okay, I don't know if we were putting a sweater on.
Oh, we
or
don't have
taking
to do
a
a
sweater
call
on.
out.
No,
call out like it's on Cherry Street. Like, see you next time on Cherry Street. Something like that. I don't know.
Good.
You have to do the wink though. Like, okay, see you next time on
Should
Cherry
we do
Street.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, on 3.
And I just want to say, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music, and anywhere you can find podcasts.
Love it.
To find more episodes like this.
Fantastic.
100%.
Yep.
And should we do like 1, 2, 3? See you next time on Cherry Street. Okay.
Oh yeah. Ready.
See you next time on Cherry Street.
Did you do a wink? You didn't wink.
Oh, I forgot to wink.
Oh, I'm the only one who did
Should
it.
we do it one more time? You can cut it. We're doing it one more time.
Do it
okay.
one more time.
We'll do 1, 2, 3. See you next time on Cherry Street. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.